afternoon or evening, and welcome to the top 5 unique buildings in 0 AD. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is to distinguish what criteria I'm going to use which makes something a building rather than a structure, and also how unique does it have to be. Well, the first part is, in order for this list anyway to be considered a building, it will need to be able to produce units. Now, these don't necessarily need to be military units or even humans, but they do need to be able to produce something that can move around the map. Secondly, they either have to be completely unique, i.e. they're only available to one faction, or, as some items are available for a small subset of the factions, such as the Celts for instance, they can be available for 2 factions at most. Anyway, let's find out what we're going to include and in what order. Straight in at number 5 we have the Kennel. Now, I like the Kennel because it's cheap, its inhabitants don't actually add to your population count, and war dogs that it produces can be unbelievably annoying for your opponent. I also find actually that it's really underused for a building that has such potential. So you can have up to 5 of these, and each one can train up to 10 dogs. So the full complement that you can get of dogs is 50, which is far more than you need to cause a little chaos in your enemy's base. And that's that, basically. For this reason alone, I'm happy to jump the Kennel in at number 5. In at number 4, we have the military colony, and this is the only building that we have on the list that's not completely unique. However, it is an amazing building that's quicker to build and cheaper than a civic centre, and thus gives fantastic opportunities for expansion. Now, while its territory expansion radius is far smaller than a civic centre, it is still sufficient to allow you to fortify an advanced area very early in the game. Another great point is that both the factions that have access to it, those being the Ptolemies and Seleucids, also get the library, and that means they have access to the Hellenistic Metropolis upgrade, which makes the arrows fired and hit points on your military colony equal to a civic centre, and that makes it very hard to dislodge. Also, in both cases, it's a mercenary building, and that expands the variety of soldiers available to the faction, which is an essential part of players for either the Ptolemies or the Seleucids getting well-rounded armies that can excel in many types of battles against many types of enemy units and siege engines. All in all, I absolutely love this building, and it's one of the best things about playing as either of the factions that I mentioned. So, for me, it's a worthy entry at number 4. And in at number 3, well, it's the Elephant Stables, and this is a Mauryan-only building, and it has a couple of things that I really like. Now, the first is that it's cheap. It's only 200 stone, 200 metal, and the second thing is that it's the only building that can garrison elephants. And now I raise this as it's far more important than most people would at first think. Basically, there's nothing I find more frustrating when using elephants than watching them popping out of the fortress and then wandering around aimlessly getting themselves shot at for no reason. Or even more annoying is when they spawn on the wrong side of the fortress and due to other buildings are forced to walk around these, with the Pathfinder causing all kinds of mayhem trying to keep them from being where they're required at the time. Now, if they could be garrisoned, then it's easy to put them back into the stable and disembark them in whichever direction takes your fancy, and that's absolutely fantastic. Anyway, enough of the frustrations of not having elephant stables. Why don't we move on to the brilliance of actually having one? Now, as stated, it's an easy way to get elephants in large numbers in a large number of locations, as you aren't restricted by having to build multiple fortresses to achieve this. In fact, with the Mauryan's champions being pretty poor, it's not actually inconceivable that you may want to completely ignore a fortress and use that extra stone elsewhere, perhaps with even making a few more elephant stables. Anyway, let's move on to number 2. And so we come to the Siege Workshop. Now, this building is definitely one of the top ones in the game, which you might think would be obvious because I've just put it as the second best unique building in the game. So anyway, that would be clear. So it's only available to the Macedonians, and it is a very cheap way to produce each and every one of the available siege weapons in the game. It's also similar to Elephant Stables in that you don't have to worry about producing a fortress to get your most powerful units, except if you want champions, heroes, etc. But nonetheless, on top of this, it's just wonderfully cheap. It only costs 300 wood, and it also takes only 40% of the time taken to build a fortress to get one of these built. So basically, on a map with plenty of wood, you can spam these siege workshops out and have a steady stream of rams, catapults and bolts to throw at your enemy. And although Macedonians are far from my favourite faction, if I ever draw them on random, you can be sure that you'll be seeing my territory covered in these buildings, as having plenty of them not only allows you to build nearer to your enemy, but also to garrison damaged siege weapons, and these are then healed once garrisoned at 3 hit points per second, which is just a massive bonus. So all in all, have to say, worthy entry at number 2. And so we arrive at the only realistic choice in my eyes for number 1, and that's the embedded military camp. It just has to be the top unique building in the game. I mean, what more is there you can say about it than people already know? Well, let me tell you. It produces most of the siege weapons, and it also has a decent variety of units that it can produce. In addition, it costs just 500 wood and 200 metal, and that means you can save your stone for catapults if you want a really quick attack on your enemy. But the most interesting thing that this building offers is that it can be built in both neutral and enemy territory. I mean, it's embedded, it's in the name. But weirdly, because of that, it can't be built in your own territory. But never mind about that, because you've got fortresses that can provide your siege weapons in that case. But one of the best things that you can do with these buildings is wait until a little bit later in the game, build one towards the edge of the map, but deep into your enemy's territory. Now, if they're not fully aware of how good these buildings are, it's very common to see sneaky ram attacks that completely level a CC, as soon as the fighting starts in the centre of the map and that little war horn sound is going off. People just don't realise that it's happening. And therefore, if you're playing against a decent Roman player, you're going to have to be constantly vigilant and keep a big eye on what's going on around your CC just because of this building. Now, of course, you may have a different opinion, but for me, this is without a single doubt the finest building in the whole game. I just love it, think it's amazing. And so we've gone from 5 to 1 yet again. So if you have any things that you want to add to that, any buildings that I missed that you think are just absolutely unbelievable, or have you got any suggestions of top 5s that you might like to hear, or see rather? If you have, then get in touch in the comments, and other than that, I will wish you a very happy week, and I look forward to seeing you in 7 days' time.